Support for Illinois Lawmakers comes from the Paul Simon Public Policy Institute at Southern Illinois University, Carbondale. Information available at paulsimoninstitute.org.
Today, Republicans and Democrats stood together to enact a bipartisan, balanced budget and end a destructive 736-day impasse.
Hello, I'm Jak Tichenor. Welcome to a special edition of Illinois Lawmakers as the Illinois House of Representatives narrowly votes to override Governor Bruce Rauner's vetoes of a new budget and the taxes to support it, thus ending the state's 2-year-plus budget crisis. Joining us on the program is State Representative Will Davis, Democrat of Homewood. Quite an afternoon. You were sort of in the leader's position there this morning this afternoon on the House floor.
It was very good to be there. I have been an advocate for necessary revenue for us to do what we needed to do for my entire time here in the General Assembly, and to be in this position today. The sad part is that it required an override in order to get there. We did what the governor asked us to do. We put together a balanced budget. We passed a balanced budget and sent it to him. Then all of a sudden the goalposts changed. Now it was more important for him to have his reform items, many of which were passed and sent to his desk. But today was a good day in the state of Illinois.
There's still more work to be done. There are still more bills to be worked on, like the K-12 education funding reform, which has been top of your list this session in the House.
Oh, absolutely. SB1 is still waiting to go to the governor's desk for his signature. He's indicated that he will veto it, and I guess we can appreciate his challenges, but hopefully he'll pull us together and let's work through the challenges before it gets to that point.
There's some language in the actual budget implementation and some of the language that was passed today that has to do with actually how that all ties together. Could you give us a little bit of a short course on that?
Well, the language indicates that in order for schools to receive funding this fall, we must pass, and the governor must sign an evidence-based model school funding formula, or school funding mechanism, if you will. SB1 is the only version of an evidence-based model that has been passed out of both chambers and hopefully will be sent to the governor. And the interesting thing about it is that it's been called a booby trap and things of that nature. Well, if you go and look at the Republican version of that bill, the same language is in that bill as well. So maybe they booby trap themselves also.
So to actually implement the bill, though, that language, the 27 criteria that go into evidence-based models, that all has to be in there for the K-12 funding to be released this year. Is that the way that works?
Well, again, the language just simply says you have to pass an evidence-based model. Now, we have passed one, which is SB1. Now, if there was another one that we would consider or could consider, then you just have to get one to the governor's desk. But thus far, the only one that has passed both chambers is SB1.
Back to the overall vote today, the override vote. You called for calm. You called for folks both in the chamber and outside not to get too extreme, not to hate, because there's been some very extreme language used, particularly against some of your Republican colleagues who broke ranks with the governor and their leadership to join you in this vote.
Well, true. That language should be condemned, not only by obviously members of the House, but the governor should condemn that language. And to my knowledge, he hasn't taken a step and used his bully pulpit to condemn any of that language. And it's happened on both sides of the aisle. Both Republicans and Democrats are receiving that kind of language.
So moving forward, we talked about K-12 education. There was a long list of things that have been negotiated behind closed doors towards workers' compensation reform, towards procurement reform, towards a large number of issues. Those aren't going away. The work is going to continue over the next few weeks on those?
Well, the thing is that many of those issues have been passed out of both chambers and awaiting signature for the governor, but the governor indicated that it doesn't go far enough. Well, this is a negotiation. This is a process. The fact that you get everything you want the first go around generally doesn't happen. It really requires someone who's ready to govern, ready to negotiate, ready to pull us back together to try to get to the point where we can all agree on those issues.
This has gone on for over 2 years now. The wait finally paid off in a new budget for the state of Illinois. Are we going to be back here in a few months asking for higher taxes because this bill didn't go far enough?
Well, I don't think so. I think the mechanisms are in place to deal with our backlog of bills in an appropriate way, particularly those bills that are accruing significant amounts of interest. Those are the ones that are a priority and that we need to be paying first. But there are mechanisms in place to deal with our backlog of bills, and the reality is that if we move forward with the budget as is and start paying our backlog of bills and start dealing with some of our other obligations, ultimately it frees up more cash that you can invest back into paying down the bills further. So it's not, I won't say it's not necessary for additional taxes, but it's not something that we have to consider right now. Let's make sure that what we have passed works, and then we can have that conversation. But I can assure you that members on both sides of the aisle are not interested in raising taxes again.
State Representative Will Davis of Homewood, thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Representative Terri Bryant of Murphysboro is one of the 15 House Republicans who broke ranks with Governor Rauner and her caucus leadership a little earlier to vote for a $5 billion tax increase to fund a new $36 billion budget for the state of Illinois, finally to try and end the impasse that's gone on for the last couple of years. Representative, good to have you on the program.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
This was a very difficult decision for someone who is well known in her district for being a fiscal conservative.
It is. And, you know, the real issue is here that we're spending right now close to $39 billion a year because of the consent decrees, the constitutional requirements, and of course, you know, the things that are continuing appropriations. So in essence, we have been spending $7 billion more than we're taking in for the last 2 years. So to look at a budget proposal that was negotiated by the rank and file members with a lot of give and take on both sides, because we're still not sure when the vote for override is taken if we'll have enough Democrats on it, as they're a little bit angry about how many cuts there are. So it doesn't have the, you know, the cuts. I think there's a lot of folks that like to cut it real deep, and we probably need to make some more cuts, but we've got to get the gridlock over first.
It's basically about a $3 billion cut across the board in a lot of state agencies and different programs. A lot of the Republicans who took the side with the majority Democrats here have state universities in their districts, much like you do with SIU Carbondale.
Yeah. Well, so I think folks who don't have the universities or really the extended state employees for prisons and mental health facilities and so on. I have 3 IDOT facilities and a CMS facility. They don't really understand how difficult this has been on them, for the fact that even like SIH is to a point where they don't want to take state employee insurance anymore because the
health care for the rest of the state, right?
So since the premiums have not been paid for the state employees' health insurance, it's put a strain on doctors and on hospitals as well as the university systems for just the obvious that they don't have the money that they need to operate.
And the mom and pop vendors who supply a lot of these state facilities in the rest of the state. The backlash from your party has been intense. What's it been like for you? From
the party leadership, we haven't really heard a lot from them. I think that they know that we're at a place where everyone's going to kind of go in the direction they need to go for their district, and hopefully still hold together as a coalition within our caucus, but maybe not on this issue. But I would tell you that some outside groups have already been recruiting for primaries on a majority of the people that voted for this budget, and that's always a real risk, but there comes a time when you have to be a statesman, or you have to govern rather than just running for office.
Have you been lobbied by the governor's office on this?
Some of his staff early on. For the last few days, no. I think he understands the people that took this vote and where they're coming from. May not agree with them, but so far, in the public, I think he's been very vocal about his feelings, and in private, I haven't had those meetings at least.
The chief criticism from a lot of the folks on your side of the aisle is there's none of the reforms so far. Are the reforms still out there? Is the turnaround agenda still alive, despite the fact it's not in this final situation?
Well, I would argue that there are some reforms there, because in the budget bill itself, there is a pension reform in that. It took off the consideration model, put in a tier 3, and then there are continuing conversations going on in negotiation for some more reforms. So I think we're going to get there, and we have a commitment from the people that we joined in putting this together to continue down that road.
Representative Terri Bryant, thanks very much for your time. We appreciate it. Thank you. House Democratic Conference Chair Greg Harris of Chicago joins us now on Illinois Lawmakers. Good to have you here, sir. You have been one of the chief negotiators behind the scenes for House Speaker Michael Madigan in terms of what actually has wound up on the floor. It's been sent over to the Senate, it's been overridden, and we're waiting on a vote here in the House. What's in the package? We've heard the broad outlines, a $5 billion income tax increase and a $36 billion budget minus about $3 billion in cuts overall.
So first off, this will be the first balanced budget the state of Illinois will have had in 3 years. It will bring stability to our state. We will pay down $8 billion of our backlog of bills. We will avoid paying $800 million of interest because we've paid down these bills. We are coming in at a level lower than the governor wanted in his introduced budget with the exact same tax rates he supported. There's $1.5 billion worth of pension reform in it and $1 billion worth of cuts to the bureaucracy so that we can put money into community organizations.
One of the things that I think has escaped a lot of folks who've been watching the program over the years is that as we've been going on with this kind of autopilot budget, we've been spending at a rate far and above what we're taking in. We
are spending this year, $39 billion at the end of last fiscal year, FY17. $39 billion. That's $3 billion more than the budget that will be before us today would have spent. So that alone will be a $3 billion cut.
The governor says there's about $2 billion in this. It's out of whack. He doesn't see where the actual savings are realized.
And actually the proposals he points to are the ones that he introduced and that the Senate and the House Republicans put in their budget. And he's referring to the Tier 3 pension program, which the Democrats accepted as a recommendation from the Republicans, and several other items like that. They were his ideas.
What's the Tier 3 do?
The Tier 3 is an option for employees that would give them a different benefit choice, but it will save the state several $100 million in taxpayer contributions.
One of the big items that's been used as kind of a nudge to get things going is the possibility of junk bond status. Universities, in some cases, are already in junk bond status. But we heard this week that Moody's Investor Services is saying this might not still, even if it passes in the form that it's in right now, still might not keep us out of junk bond status.
Right, so there are 3 ratings agencies. We heard right after the package passed the Senate from Standard & Poor's and Fitch's that they saw passage of a balanced budget as an excellent sign and worried that it would cause an instant downgrade should our action here today fail. They said that in their announcements. Moody's said they are giving us a limited time to enact this budget, and it could still have issues, and they're looking at our backlog of old bills and our pension obligations that we still need to resolve. So they said there are still ways we have to go.
This was at least in the House, a more of a bipartisan effort to get this done. There were 15 Republicans who sided with the majority Democrats, one in the Senate, a little bit different situation there. But this is still being called the Madigan tax increase by the governor and his party.
Well, I wish we would put aside the partisan finger pointing and the Twitter flame wars and all this stuff that has become political discourse nowadays and look at the fact, there are a lot of tough things we had to do. We had to make a lot of cuts. We had to raise some revenue. We had to balance the budget. People have been crying out for years, balance the budget, do your jobs, get it done. That's what we're focusing on. And I'm grateful that members on both sides of the aisle were able to make some very difficult decisions to the benefit of the people of Illinois.
Has this battle of wills between the governor and Speaker Madigan been worth it at the end of the day because of the suffering that's been experienced around the state?
No, this should have been done. The governor should have sat down, as all governors have done for the 200 years that Illinois has existed. This is the only time we have ever been in this situation when a governor was not willing to sit down with all 4 legislative leaders and work out a deal.
The question from the Republican side of the aisle is what happens next with a lot of the reform ideas that were in the negotiations? Are those moot now, or are those talks going to continue?
There are already reform bills on the governor's desk that are through both chambers in local government consolidation and procurement reform and workers' comp and the sale of the Thompson Center. There are ongoing negotiations about property tax freezes. So there's a willingness, I think, among all four caucuses to continue to work together because we know we have to address these things.
Representative Harris, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Jim.
Senate Republican Leader Designee Bill Brady of Bloomington joins us now on Illinois Lawmakers. First of all, congratulations, Senator.
Jak, thanks.
Great to have you here. Obviously, we're talking a bit ahead of the big vote today in the House of Representatives, which is to override the governor's veto of the $5 billion tax increase and the $36 billion budget. Some aspects of that were part of the Capitol compromise, but not all. Were you surprised that the House Republicans broke with as many as they did to side with the Democrats on this?
Well, first of all, I was surprised anyone, Republican or Democrat, would vote for what they voted for last week in the House and then the Senate without the reforms. I don't think it matters if you're Republican or Democrat. The people of Illinois need property tax relief in the form of a freeze. They need an education funding bill. They need workplace reforms to secure their jobs and to bring more jobs to Illinois. So there's a whole host of issues that were part of the original grand bargain, later became part of the Capitol compromise, that surprised me that anyone would support this measure without the benefit of those things that we negotiated in a very bipartisan way over the last several months.
Was it possible that, and I've heard this from various folks around here, that perhaps some of the House Republicans tipped their hand a little bit too early on Friday when there was that test vote on the overall package that was coming over here?
I think that was a gesture of good faith, and it led to very serious negotiations. Leader Durkin and I worked throughout the night with our negotiating teams who were working with House Democrats and Senate Democrat negotiators. In fact, they left here about midnight. Leader Durkin and I continued to talk till about 1 a.m. under the hope that we would be able to close the gap and have a solution for the people of Illinois before the 4th of July holiday. Unfortunately, House Democrats chose to take a different path that morning, but the vote earlier, I think, was just a vote of good faith that we are earnest to do something that works for Illinois in a bipartisan way.
There have been leadership meetings since that vote, and the Republicans haven't taken part in it. You or Representative Durkin?
Well, I don't know that the leadership meeting, if Representative Leader Durkin and I aren't there, although I'm the designee. There were meetings with Leader Durkin and Leader Radonio on Friday, as late as I think 3 or 4 o'clock, and we had hoped there would be on Saturday. But then again, House Democrats took it upon themselves to break those negotiations off and run with this package. I don't think it was helpful because, as I said, the package, whether you're for it or not, is incomplete without property tax relief and a freeze, without a spending cap. This doesn't work without a spending cap, without the workplace reforms that create jobs that grow revenues. There's so much missing that was negotiated, not to mention probably one of the most important aspects, education funding reform.
Is it still possible at this late date to circle back and reach agreement on those issues?
It must happen. It's always possible. President Colleton has given me his assurances that regardless of the outcome of this budget package, that we will continue to talk about those important reforms. I think he might have even been taken back a little bit in surprise of what happened last week after our Friday negotiation sessions. I don't want to speak for him, but he has said to me that he will continue to work with us in earnest on the reforms that we worked on a bipartisan way to accomplish, and I'm going to take him at that pledge.
Were you surprised that Senator Ryder from the Charleston area, where EIU is home, were you surprised that he broke with Senate Republicans?
Yes, I was, but you have to realize there's a lot of pressure here. Senator Ryder had 2 representatives in his district who voted for that package. Eastern Illinois is important to all of us, but specifically important to Senator Ryder and to those 2 representatives. I wish they hadn't have done it, and let me make it clear, because this isn't the right way to do this. But I think people realize there's been a lot of pressure on a lot of members down here having gone this long. But those reforms are so important to us, so we were disappointed.
Senator Brady, thanks so much for your time, and good luck in the new role.
Thank you very much.
Joining us now on Illinois Lawmakers, Democratic State Senator Scott Bennett of Champaign. This has been quite a term. You're new to the Senate, and so at this point, all you've known has been pretty much chaos up to this point.
Sadly, that's the case. I came in the same week that Governor Rauner came in. Was appointed when Mike Frerichs became the treasurer and came in. I was a prosecutor before this job, my first job in politics, and it was a lot different than I thought it was going to be, with partisan fighting right from the start.
You watched here this afternoon that the House of Representatives followed suit with what the Illinois Senate did a couple of days earlier. Your reaction to finally moving this thing forward?
Well, I think it's a mistake for people to be celebrating. If anything, what we should do is feel some relief that we're finally out of this 2-year impasse. We were so close to the abyss. There's still some question of what the credit rating is going to be as a result of this. But this should be an embarrassment that we've even gotten to this point. And so the fact that this isn't the summer of 2015, we shouldn't be saying we did what we're expected to do, the very baseline of what legislators are supposed to do, pass a budget. We got there late. I'm glad we got there at all, but we still have a lot of work to do.
One of the questions that is going to come up is when this actual tax increase takes effect. Now, earlier versions of the legislation that was discussed here at the Capitol had that going retroactive all the way back to January 1. Instead, this takes place now, immediately. So the bite on people's taxes or their monthly payments or monthly bills won't be as high as it would have been earlier?
That's correct. And the flip side of that is the revenue estimates are going to be a lot lower as well. But the further we got away from January, it was becoming almost impossible to figure out how to go back and do it retroactively. We negotiate all spring in the grand bargain for some kind of a revenue increase. But as Republican leader Radonio said, when we were voting on it in February and March, the window is closing. You can't go back more than a month or two and get this done. So ultimately, the fact that it's the summer, it has to start in the summer.
And looking forward, one of the key parts of this is trying to pay down that $8 billion, or actually $8 billion toward the $15 billion in back bills. How are we going to do that under this structure?
Well, in part by borrowing it. And that's where when people say, well, what difference does it make if we're junk bond or one level above junk bond in our credit rating? It's because we can't borrow the money if we're a junk bond status. A reputable lender can't have that in their portfolios, the junk bond investments. So we're going to get better return for the taxpayers by borrowing it if we're at a higher level. And what we're going to do is work for the next few years to try to pay a lot of that off. What we have to remember is when you see that number, 15 billion, 8 billion, these are owed largely to Illinois businesses and vendors. And so that's money that's going to be injected right back in the economy.
Senator Scott Bennett, thanks so much for your time on Illinois Lawmakers. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Jack.
Republican Representative Tom Demmer of Dixon joins us now on the program. Representative, you were one of those who voted against the tax package and the budget that sailed through here the other day. Were you surprised by the number of your Republican colleagues who joined with majority Democrats?
Before the vote, we seemed to have an indication that there was sufficient support to pass that. So it wasn't so much a surprise at that moment. In our discussions with our caucus, our focus had always been on the big picture. How can we pass both a budget and enact some reforms that we think will help us long term? So we had, thorough discussions about that within our caucus, and I think there's still an interest among House Republicans to get those reforms accomplished.
Do you think that realistically holding out a little longer on those reforms, on school funding reform, workers' comp, would it have yielded a different result?
I think it would have. I was a part of the negotiating team for the House Republican caucus. We sat in hours and hours of meetings, and I talked to my colleagues who were negotiating various issues, things like workers' compensation, property tax relief, pension reform. We were very close to an agreement with Democrats on what we believe are substantive reforms in those areas. So we thought we had very good momentum in the days and hours before the vote. We thought we had good momentum that would have helped us get a bipartisan agreement on those important issues.
Was there a sense among some of the folks on your side of the aisle that maybe in that test vote that was taken last Friday that some of the House Republicans might have tipped their hand a little too early, that they were eager to cross over?
Well, I think when you talk to a lot of the folks who did vote yes on that, you still heard them talk about how important those reforms are. I mean, even in the aftermath of the real votes that happened on Sunday, people still said it's very important that we still address property tax relief, that we still address workers' compensation reform.
How do you, at this point, circle back and address those topics in a meaningful way?
You know, that's the important thing, is I think that we share the same sense of urgency that we had on the budget side. We have to look to the fact that a budget doesn't solve all our problems, and that one of the only ways we can solve Illinois' problems long term is to restart our economy. And one of the ways we can do that is by enacting these reforms.
There are some obvious fractures in the House Republican caucus at the moment because of the vote that they took on revenues in particular, and there's been some pretty ugly reaction from the public on this. How do you mend fences now with your colleagues?
Well, I think we respect each other. So I understand that we may have disagreed on this. I think that people voted in what they thought was the best interest of their district. And as a House Republicans, we still agree far more than we disagree. So I think we look at these kind of issues, we respect where each other are coming from, and we try to come back together so we can move forward together.
Under the framework that's been approved thus far, does this get Illinois back on a firm financial footing enough so that business will look at the state of Illinois and not wonder if the place is going to be open in a couple of years or a couple of months, days even?
Well, I think this is, what we've been saying all along, is that a budget is only a part of the whole package. We have to give more opportunities to people who are looking to, where they're going to live or work, where they're going to school, what they're going to study, what they're investing or buying. We need to provide better opportunities in Illinois. So a budget is only one piece of that puzzle. We know what people are complaining about right now. They're paying too high of property taxes. It's too hard for people to add jobs in Illinois because of our regulatory and work comp environment. We need to make those kind of changes because that's the only way we put Illinois on a different trajectory going forward.
Representative Demmer, thanks very much.
Thank you.
That's it for this special edition of Illinois Lawmakers. We'll be back for the fall veto session here on public television. From Springfield, so long.